Hello and welcome to the first video in my series on self-publishing. My name is Sarah Barber and today I'm going to be giving you a very broad overview of the different types of publishing options that are available to you. The good news is that there's never been a better time to be a writer. You have more choices, more channels, more control than authors have had at any point since human beings learned how to write. The bad news is that there's a lot of information out there and you have a lot of decisions you need to make. So this video series is going to try and break some of that down for you. In this particular video, I'm going to give you a very general look at your publishing options. In the second video, I'm going to be talking about which option is right for which kind of book and what kind of author. In the third one, I'm going to make the assumption that you've decided to go ahead and self-publish, and we will talk about the kind of services that you'll need to produce a marketable book and what you can expect to pay for those services. And finally, in the fourth video, I will talk about marketing your self-published book. And with each video, I will list additional resources below so that you can go more in depth into any of those subjects if you want to. Okay, so today I'm going to be talking about traditional publishing and self-publishing and comparing and contrasting the two. And then I'm going to talk about hybrid or indie presses, which are kind of a blend of those two. And none of these are necessarily better than the other. It really just depends on what's a good fit for you and for your book. And finally, I'm going to talk about the one bad option that's out there and tell you how to spot the warning signs and stay well away so you don't get taken advantage of. So let's start by comparing the basic process of traditional publishing with self-publishing. So with traditional publishing, you typically start by finding an agent. The agent then submits your book proposal to publishing houses. If a company likes your proposal, it will offer to buy the rights to your book and the agent will negotiate a contract for you. Now, when you're submitting proposals to larger traditional publishing companies, they usually require those proposals to be submitted through an agent, and agents also serve an important purpose in that they really understand the business and will help you get the best possible contract. However, there are a lot of mid-sized and smaller publishers that don't require you to submit through an agent. If you can find one that says it takes unsolicited proposals, you can send your proposal directly to them. There is often, not always, but often, a lot of rejection involved in the traditional publishing process. Your proposal might get turned down by both agents and publishers several times before it gets picked up. The first Harry Potter novel was turned down by 12 different publishers before Bloomsbury picked it up. And even then, J.K. Rowling was told that she shouldn't quit her day job because she was probably never going to make it as a full-time writer. So don't be discouraged, but do be aware that it can take a long time. And if your book is time sensitive, then you want to keep that in mind. Okay, once you have a contract, the publisher gets to make most of the decisions about the book. Hopefully you'll have some say in the editing process. You may or may not get some say in the cover design. You probably won't get a whole lot of say in where the book is distributed or how much it costs at the retail level. Now, with self-publishing, there's no publishing house. Retailers publish anyone who can upload the right kind of file. And you, the author, make all the decisions. So you can decide what your book is going to sell for. You can decide when it goes on sale. You can decide what the cover looks like, everything. Typically when we talk about self-publishing, we're thinking about uploading an ebook file to Amazon and making it available. You can also make ebooks available from your own website. I see that more with information product type books rather than more traditional fiction, nonfiction books, but it's a possibility. And you can also make hard copy books available in a variety of ways. I'm not going to talk too much about them in this series, but you can also make audiobooks available. A lot of self-publishing authors do. So no matter how you do it, the point is that there are no gatekeepers. It's up to you to make sure you're putting out a high-quality product and make the right decisions for you and your book. Costs. When you go through a traditional publisher, the publisher pays all the costs associated with the production of the book. These typically include editing, interior and cover design, printing, distribution, and marketing. One thing that the author does pay is a commission to his or her agent, if they have one. Typically, this runs about 12 to 15% of any advances and royalties that the author makes, so be sure to factor that into your decision making. When you self-publish, it's up to you to pay the production costs up front. And now, you're not required to edit your book or get a fancy cover for it. Remember, there are no gatekeepers. But if you want your book to have even a remote chance of selling, you really want to put some effort into producing a polished professional product. And that's where things like editing and design come in. I'm going to talk more in the third episode about what services you need and what you can expect to pay. But for now, I'll just say it can cost anywhere from a few hundred to a few $1,000s if you want to put out a respectable, marketable book. Earnings. This is where things get interesting. With a traditional publisher, once you sign a contract, you often get what's called an advance against royalties, which is a lump sum payment that's meant to tide you over until the book is on the market. So that's while you finish writing the book, editing the book, while it's in production, and hopefully sometime soon after that it starts earning money. Advances are becoming less common, and the smaller the publisher you go with, the less likely you are to get one. Once the book has started to turn a profit, that is, after it's met the cost of production and the advance, then the author starts earning royalties on the sale of each book. There's a range, but you can probably expect royalties to start around 8% for paperback sales, 10 to 15% for hard copy sales, and I think 25% is now pretty typical for ebook sales. Bear in mind that, remember that if you have an agent, your agent gets 12 to 15% of your earnings. Now, self-publishing, there's no advance. If you publish through a retailer like Amazon or Barnes & Noble, you can typically expect royalties between 35 to 70% from each sale, depending on where you publish and how you price your book. The retailer takes the remaining amount as a commission. If you sell directly from your own website using a shopping cart service, you could make as much as 95%. If you publish hard copies, your profit will depend on factors like your printing costs and what retail price you set on it. So the royalty terms are definitely in your favor for self-publishing, but whether you actually make more money in the long run depends on a lot of factors, and we'll talk about those in the second video. Rights. When a traditional publisher offers you a contract, they're buying the rights to your work, typically for as long as they are willing to make the book available in print. You want to be really sure when you sign a contract that you know what rights you're giving up and for how long. When you sell your book, that means you no longer have the right to do whatever you like with it. If you wanted to include it in an anthology, for example, or publish excerpts of it somewhere else, you would have to get permission from the publisher to do that. If you get a better offer from a different publisher, or if Hollywood comes knocking and wants to make a movie out of your book, then those companies have to negotiate with the publisher, not with you, for the rights to do those things. Now, with self-publishing, of course, the rights are yours, and you can do whatever you like with your work. I've seen a lot of authors include their books in box sets with other authors, for example, to help drive sales. You can publish excerpts from one book in another book. You can take the book off the market entirely if you want to for some reason. It's also worth noting here that self-publishing and traditional publishing aren't necessarily mutually exclusive. Some successful self-publishing authors have been offered contracts by traditional publishing houses, and sometimes they take them up on that and sometimes they turn them down, depending on the situation. But the point is, it's totally up to you. Revisions. Okay, why would you want to make changes to your book after it's published? Well, maybe you'd like to include new research or fix typos or let readers know about new books that you've published since then, or you just want to update your contact information. With the traditional publisher, you usually have to wait until the publisher decides it's worth putting out a second edition to make any changes. With self-publishing, assuming we're talking about ebooks, you can make changes to your files anytime you like. In most cases, these changes will go live within about 24 hours of when you make them. And if you're using a print-on-demand service, again, you just need to make changes to the files you're using. It's very fast and very straightforward. Okay, so that was a very general look at the two options for publishing. Now I'm going to talk a bit about a third option, which is sort of a blend of the two. It's sometimes called a hybrid or indie publishing. Sometimes these companies are called micropresses or even nanopresses because they're even smaller than micropresses. There's no one formula for these companies. They do different things in different ways. So this is a very generalized overview of how they might work. With this model, basically, you work with a publisher, often a very small 1 or 2 person company. There's no advance, but the publisher pays the upfront costs of production and handles most of the marketing in return for a share of the royalties. With a system like this, authors can usually expect to make between 50 to 70% of the net profits. Okay, so that was a very general look at those two options for publishing. Now I'm going to talk a bit about a third option, which is sort of a blend of the two. And this sometimes this is called hybrid or indie publishing, sometimes micro presses or even nano presses because they're smaller than micro presses. There's no one way that these companies all work. They're very individualized. So this is a very general overview of what you might expect from an indie press. Usually, you work with a publisher, often a very small 1 or 2 person company. There's no advance, but the publisher pays the upfront costs of production and handles most of the marketing in return for a share of the royalties. With a system like this, authors can usually expect to make between 50 to 70% of the net profits. Remember, that's after production costs have been paid and the retailer has taken its commission. Typically, you either keep your rights or you give them up for a relatively short term. And because indie presses are so small and so specialized, you're more likely to get individualized attention and have more control over various decisions. Generally, indie presses focus on ebooks, but some do hard copy distribution as well. So these might be an option if you are attracted to the flexibility of self-publishing, but find the process a bit intimidating or expensive. Finally, I'm going to wrap up with a warning about vanity presses. These are companies, usually disguised as legitimate publishers, that take advantage of naive authors, usually by charging them a lot of money to publish their books for them. Now, before I get going too harshly on vanity presses, I will say that there are legitimate companies out there that offer package deals to self-publishing authors. So, for example, you could get one of these companies to handle your editing and your design, or you could ask them to handle your printing, your distribution, and your marketing. But these are straightforward service providers. You pay for a service, you get the service, you're done. You're not locking yourself into a relationship that you can't get out of with a company that's trying to take advantage of you. So, how do you recognize a vanity press? First of all, you never ever want to get in a situation where you're paying both the cost of production and giving up royalty shares. There's absolutely no reason to do that. And this goes for agents too, by the way. Don't ever sign on with an agent who charges you a reading fee or any other upfront fees. They get paid on commission after they get a contract for you. Next, have ballpark figures for production costs in mind so that you can recognize really outrageous charges when you see them. Like I said earlier, there's a huge range. We'll talk more in the third episode about what you can expect to pay for various services. But it's a good idea to do some research and at least have a general idea about what a reasonable price for various services is. Next, be wary of publishers who make extravagant promises, especially if you are a new or unknown author. If they're promising worldwide distribution, for example, that sounds like you're going to get your book in bookstores all over the world, but sometimes if you look at the fine print, you'll see that what that really means is print on demand, which you can do very easily and very cheaply yourself. Just be careful of anything that sounds too good to be true. If they're promising you loads of sales or lots of reviews in great journals, even though no one's ever heard of you before, just be sure to read the fine print very, very carefully and understand what they're really talking about. Next, you want to be very careful of publishers that ask you to do anything that isn't directly related to writing your book or marketing your book. I came across this vanity press the other day. Now, not only do they charge over $600 to the author up front in production fees and take a 40% cut of the royalties, which is a huge red flag right there, they also include this little tidbit in their website saying that new and unpublished writers are given the opportunity to edit 2 manuscripts. Now, what this says to me is that you're committing to doing a lot of time-consuming work that you're probably not qualified to do unless you are a professional editor, and it means that your book is probably being edited by someone who is not a professional editor, who may or may not have any clue what they're doing. I have also heard of authors being obligated to sell a certain number of their books every month, and if they can't sell them, they have to pay for them. I've heard of authors being obligated to intern at publishing companies for 6 months to a year, which is crazy stuff. You have better options. You do not need to take a contract with a company that asks you to do stuff like this. Now that said, if they ask you to do things like finish your manuscript on time, communicate with your editor on a regular basis, help market your book by doing book signings and speaking engagements related to your book, that's fine. That's all perfectly legitimate. It's the stuff that's not related to marketing your book that you want to watch out for. Okay. And finally, be wary of any company that's doing anything unethical or asking authors to do anything unethical. I came across this press a few days ago. Now, first of all, they only give the authors 10% royalties, which is not great. And then they charge authors a publishing fee of $100. And they say that this includes the ISBN, edits, formatting, cover design, blah, 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 which doesn't really make sense because $100 will not cover, isn't nearly enough to cover all of that stuff. But then when you read a little further, you realize that what they're really doing is offering the author an incentive to get friends and family to write positive reviews of the book, and the author will get back $20 for each positive review he can convince somebody to write. Now you want to be really careful with a situation like this. You're on really thin ice, ethically speaking. You never want to be in a situation where money is being exchanged for good reviews. It looks bad, it could tarnish your reputation as an author, it's probably in violation of Amazon's terms of service. It's just a bad idea, and it leaves a really bad taste in my mouth. Now, you have, as an author today, so many other better options available to you. Don't feed these vanity press beasts that just want to take advantage of authors. Okay, so that is our very broad overview of your publishing options. In the next episode, I'm going to be talking about which system is right for which books. Again, very general, there are always exceptions. But some types of books tend to do better when they're self-published. Other types of books tend to do better with a traditional publisher. And we'll talk about which is which. If you want to know when the next episode is available, just sign up for my mailing list. The sign-up form is right down at the very bottom of the page, and I will let you know as soon as it's up. And if you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments section or send me an email, and I will do my best to answer. That's all for now. Thank you very much, and I will see you next time.